Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to the channel. We have some breaking news. Former UFC bantamweight champion T.J Dillashaw has retired from MMA, or has he really? If you've been paying attention to the latest news surrounding T.J Dillashaw and his supposed retirement, you've probably seen that there has been multiple conflicting reports about T.J Dillashaw's retirement from usually credible sources. You have one party saying T.J Dillashaw's retired. You have another party saying, no, T.J Dillashaw's not retired. We're going to sift through that, and we're going to get to the bottom of it, whether or not T.J Dillashaw has actually retired or not. And then also, I'm going to give you my theory, and I 100% believe this theory. It's pure speculation. Not a lot of people are going to talk about it, especially in the mainstream MMA media. They're not really going to talk about it because they probably get in trouble. It's a little bit reckless. But I am so confident in this theory. I'm going to tell you guys here on this video. You guys can come back in a year, call me an idiot saying I don't know what I'm talking about. Or you might be back in a year and saying, Joey, you called it spot on. But we'll get to that in a second. How did all this news come to be? There is a Twitter called UFC Roster Watch. And essentially they get a list of who's eligible to be put in the UFC rankings, and then they compare it to the previous list, and if a fighter is no longer on the new list, you know, when they compare it to the old list, they essentially say this fighter has been removed. And that can mean a lot of things. That can mean they were cut, that can mean they retired, it can mean they were injured and removed. And what happens usually, and a lot of people have to stop doing this, when there is a notable fighter who is tweeted out from UFC Roster Watch as being removed, all the fans, all the media start eulogizing this fighter as if, I can't believe that the UFC cut this fighter, or I can't believe this fighter's retired. And sometimes it's just not the case. We have to wait for official, credible sources to confirm they've been cut by the UFC or confirm that they have been, officially retired and inform the UFC. We got to stop acting like every time a fighter's removed from being eligible to be ranked, that it's the end of the world and that fighter is gone from the UFC forever. So after this came out, there was a lot of speculation online. And then one of the first tweets I saw was from Mike Boone via MMA Junkie. He posted, T.J Dillashaw team tells me that he has not been released from the UFC roster and has not retired from MMA. Dillashaw has been removed from the UFC rankings while he takes what's expected to be a lengthy recovery from his shoulder injury. So in case you don't remember, T.J Dillashaw's last fight was against Aljamain Sterling at UFC 280, where his shoulder was injured. He got mauled in the fight. Whether it was because of the shoulder injury or not, it definitely affected how dominant he was defeated at UFC 280. And he comes out and says, I've had this injury for 6 months, but I didn't want to miss this opportunity, blah, 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 blah. And first off, shame on T.J Dillashaw. And I know, he's got to get a check, so I do feel for him. Jose Aldo could have been fighting for the title. 100% healthy Jose Aldo could have had a chance to become a 2-division champion. And instead, we had a tainted T.J Dillashaw who was nowhere near 100%, come in and just get absolutely destroyed by Aljamain Sterling. But T.J Dillashaw has had a litany of injuries. His fight against Corey Sandhagen, was rescheduled last year because of a cut. And then he injured his knee in the Corey Sandhagen fight. So it's just one of those things where he's been perpetually injured. He's 36 years old, which in the bantamweight division, that might as well be 55 years old. So it's not out of the realm of possibility. He's had a chance to reclaim the belt. He lost. He got destroyed. He needs this shoulder surgery. He needs rehab. He's probably going to be out a year, maybe 8 months at best. And, it's kind of reasonable to think that maybe T.J Dillashaw has retired. And he's only fought twice in the last few years because you look back, he fought Henry Cejudo back in January of 2019, and then he got popped for EPO in his system, which is injectable only. He clearly tweeted, people give him credit, say, you know what? He had fessed up to it. Well, it's only injectable, so how would he not fess up to it? But that's besides the point. That's a topic for another video. And then he got suspended for 2 years, comes back, he fights Sandhagen, doesn't really look the same, but gets a win, squeaks out a win. A lot of people thought he lost. And then he gets dominated by Aljamain Sterling and gets another injury. And he's probably just tired of all these injuries. He has other businesses. He's probably making money there. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that he's retired. But Mike Bone from, MMA Junkie says he's not retired. Well, then you have Ariel Helwani come out and he posts a video along with this tweet. And you can go watch it on his Twitter, and he says, T.J Dillashaw has decided to retire. The UFC was notified around a week and a half ago. Here's more from my car on what happened. He posted a video of what happened. And so then I'm like, okay, what's going on here? Because you have MMA Junkie saying he's not retired. You have Ariel Helwani saying he is retired. Then you have Aaron Bronstetter, who works for TSN, who's a TV partner of the UFC. He came out and said that, basically, I'll read the tweet. He says, a UFC official confirms that T.J. Dillashaw was not released and has not informed the promotion of his retirement. Dillashaw wants to focus on family time, recovering from his injuries, and will be taking a prolonged absence as a result. So now you have two sources saying that T.J. Dillashaw is not retired. You have Ariel Helwani, who's a reliable source, saying he is retired. And then you have Mark Raimondi, who works for ESPN, who came out and said former bantamweight champion T.J. Dillashaw has retired from the UFC, according to his agent Tiki. So now, what is going on here? Because you have multiple sources saying all these different things. Well, supposedly now we have a concrete answer. Apparently, T.J. Dillashaw has informed the UFC that he is retired. Aaron Bronstetter put out a correction. He said, I'd like to correct my previous report. T.J. Dillashaw's team confirmed that he has indeed decided to retire, as initially reported, which I have confirmed with a UFC official. So Aaron Bronstetter corrects his report, says that he is retired. So now everyone's on the same page saying T.J. Dillashaw is retired from the UFC. But is that what's really going on here? And how did everybody mess this up? Well, looking back at the initial tweets, Aaron Bronstetter, I think, said he talked with the UFC official, so that's not a direct source with T.J. Dillashaw. I know that's usually a reliable source, but there could have been a misunderstanding there. Then you have Mike Boone from MMA Junkie. He said he talked to a teammate, and he's also corrected, saying that T.J. Dillashaw is indeed retired from the UFC. Which, let's just pretend for a second that's 100%, and that T.J. Dillashaw is retired and he never fights again. How do we really feel about that? Because T.J. Dillashaw, while he did great things, he's one of the best bantamweights of all time, in my opinion. His upset against Renan Barão at UFC 173 is something a lot of people will never forget. To go in there as if he was a lamb to the slaughter and to put on a world-class beating against Renan Barão is something that people will never forget. Then went on a decent tear and, tried to go down and become a double champ and shut down the flyweight division, but then he gets popped for EPO. Does that put an asterisk next to his name a little bit? It's really hard to decide. For me, just the fact that he injected EPO into his body. And then you go back and look at the Renan Barão performances where he put career-altering 5-round beatings on Renan Barão, where I think the one was 4 rounds, but the first one was 5 rounds. And the combinations that he was throwing in that 5th round and in that 4th round were just unbelievable. For me at the time, I speculated myself that I thought he was on EPO because the cardio was just straight up insanity. I know they've said USADA has gone back and tested and saying, it wasn't found. It's hard to catch EPO. That's why they took so long to catch him, in my personal opinion. But he's still done some great things in MMA. He was a fun fighter to watch. He was always exciting. He was never really ducking fights. He also basically ended the career of Cody Garbrandt, put beatings on him at UFC 217 and 227. Cody Garbrandt's never been the same again. So, for me, he's a 2-time champion. He lost his belt, was able to come back and get it back from Cody Garbrandt after losing it to Dominic Cruz a couple years prior. T.J. Dillashaw is just always going to be remembered as one of the best, but with it is always going to be mentioned the EPO and the use of it. Now, is T.J. Dillashaw going to be remembered as one of the all-time greats? I don't think so. I don't think people are really going to put him there. Honestly, I really don't believe that they're going to put him there. I think right now he's probably a top 3 if you have, completely ignore the EPO allegations, or not allegations, the EPO situation where he was busted. But nonetheless, we lose an exciting fighter. I'm not too happy with what happened in his last fight, but I understand he's got to get a paycheck. So, for me, I'm kind of sympathetic to that. But I just felt like we were robbed out of a fight because I would have rather him wait on the sideline for another 6-8 months if we had to see him get a title shot and let somebody else fight for the title in the meantime. And then whoever was the champion could fight Dillashaw when he was able to return. But it's not unreasonable to think that at his advanced age, in the division that he's in, the lower weight classes, being 36 years old, potentially not being able to use PEDs anymore could affect his performance. It's not unreasonable to think that he actually is retired. But in my opinion, even if TJ Dillashaw is 100% committed, he's saying, you know what, I'm retired, I'm never coming back. If that in his mind is what he's thinking, I do believe we'll see him back. We know how MMA retirements work. TJ Dillashaw has, over the course of his career, shown that he's one of the most competitive fighters there ever was. And I just have a hard time believing that he's going to sit out, for another 2-3 years and just never fight. I think potentially in 2024, spring of 2024, I think we will see TJ Dillashaw return. If he is in fact actually retired, I think he will return. He'll get his shoulder surgery. He'll say, I'm starting to get that itch back. He's going to get back to 100% health or as close to it as he possibly can be and come back and fight within the UFC and look to get maybe one big win and then back into a title shot. And people will say, well, he fought injured last time. There's always that narrative. Even if Aljamain Sterling is somehow still the champion, there's that narrative there. But besides the fact that I think no matter what, TJ Dillashaw is going to come back, here's what I think he's actually doing. And I want to take a look real quick at Conor McGregor. And I know that sounds weird. Why are you talking about Conor McGregor in a TJ Dillashaw retirement video? Conor McGregor broke his leg at UFC 264 against Dustin Poirier. He got 10-8'd and then he broke his leg, almost finished. It ended up being a TKO doctor stoppage. Brutal leg break. Then you have, in 2022, you have USADA's random testing. And all of a sudden, in 2022, Conor McGregor has not been tested. That's straight up insanity. I made a video about it a couple months ago. But Conor has not been tested, not once. And everyone's like, what's going on here? Is the UFC showing favoritism? And what ends up coming out is that Conor McGregor has removed himself from the testing pool. So that means, essentially, USADA random testing does not apply to Conor McGregor. I don't know why he's still in the rankings if he's not eligible to be tested by USADA, but there he is. And basically, I'm not going to read word for word exactly what Conor tweeted. But essentially what Conor put out there while people were speculating, and what I believe Conor is doing, is he removed himself from the testing pool. He is taking banned substance under the USADA policy to heal his leg. And also, in my opinion, reach peak physical condition. And then he said, you know what? I'm eligible for testing in February. I'm going to come back. I'm going to take 2 tests. And then I'll be right back on track to fight. And what he's talking about is the UFC can grant an exemption because once you leave the USADA pool, which there's no real reason to leave the USADA pool outside of retirement or being cut from the UFC, once you leave, there is a 6-month waiting period where you have to be tested for 6 months before you can fight again. Well, the UFC can waive that period and they can say, okay, you have to provide 2 clean samples and then you can fight in the UFC. And there's only one time I ever remember the UFC using this exemption, and it was at UFC 200 for Brock Lesnar. Because what would have happened if Brock Lesnar had to be in the testing pool for 6 months? He would have deflated. He would have melted, and he would have been completely off his PEDs, and his whole body would have melted. But since he was waived and he only had to provide 2 clean samples, he could cycle off, still have those benefits from the PEDs, and then return and fight Mark Hunt at UFC 200. Mark Hunt, because Brock Lesnar subsequently ended up testing positive anyway, Mark Hunt is still suing the UFC, I believe, because of that. So Conor McGregor is doing that. Whether it should be allowed or not because of the leg break, I'm not here to debate that. If a doctor is intending, saying you need these potential banned substances, I'm recommending them as a doctor for your recovery, and he leaves the USADA pool to use those, okay. But nonetheless, it should be regulated somehow. There should be some wording in the USADA plan to allow that, but it should be regulated because then you can just say, okay, well, I'm doing this based on the advice of a medical doctor, and then I abuse it. So what I believe is going on with TJ Dillashaw, he has a lot of injuries. The shoulder injury he's having surgery on, or he might have already had surgery on. Apparently, it's a very serious injury. He's going to come back. He's going to have rehab. I believe what he's going to do is he's going to abuse PEDs, whether medically advised or not. He's going to abuse PEDs. He's going to take a year off. He's going to recover from all these injuries because a lot of these PEDs help with, recovery with injuries. I think he's going to abuse these PEDs. And then I think after he gets back to peak form, he's going to inform the UFC that he would like to return. Now, in Conor's case or TJ's case, the UFC may very well say, well, you have to wait 6 months. And then that can kind of affect that plan a little bit. But I think that's exactly what TJ Dillashaw is doing here. He's saying, you know what? I'm retired. I want to be removed from the USADA testing pool. He's going to use banned substances. He's going to get back to 100%. He's going to get back to peak physical condition. And then, he's going to say, I'm ready to come back. I'm ready to fight. And he may come back and look better than ever. I doubt the UFC issues him an exemption because of his history. But nonetheless, PED usage and benefits don't necessarily, completely disappear after 6 months. I feel like they're less useful after 6 months. I'm not an expert on that. But, if they were to grant him an exemption, there's no doubt those PEDs would help him. But I think this is exactly what TJ Dillashaw is doing. He is taking a move out of Conor McGregor's playbook. There's no doubt that's what Conor McGregor is doing. Again, whether medically advisable from a doctor or not, that's what he's doing. And that's what TJ's doing. He knows he's going to be off for a while. He's going to take this long layoff, and he's going to try to come back looking better than ever in the UFC. He will fight, believe me. And I want you to come back to this video when the news comes out, and I want you to comment on this video. TJ Dillashaw will fight in 2024. Mark my words on that. And probably in the meantime, in the next 9 months or so, we'll probably start seeing some pictures of TJ Dillashaw probably looking jacked as hell. So let me know what you guys think about all this down in the comments. Don't forget to like the video, and thank you so much for watching.